Welcome back to Real Talk, the podcast where I dive deep into the most fascinating films ever made. I'm your host, Josh, and today we're rat-stepping into the eerie, industrial dreamscape of Eraserhead, David Lynch's surreal, horrifying, and utterly mesmerizing debut feature. Now, if you've been with us for a while, you know back in Season 2, Episode 9, we already covered Eraserhead as part of our cult films discussion. This time, I want to take a look at it a little bit differently, in remembrance of David Lynch and its place among his broader filmography. This film was released in 1977, after 5 years in the making. The film is as disturbing and enigmatic now as it was then, refusing to be neatly categorized or easily explained. It's a film that doesn't just ask you to watch. It demands that you feel, absorb, and wrestle with it long after it's ended. If you've seen Eraserhead, you know that describing it in simple terms feels nearly impossible. This is an experience, an intrusion into the subconscious that lingers like a half-remembered nightmare. If you haven't seen it, you should, absolutely, but prepare yourself for something truly one of a kind. This is not a conventional horror film, yet it evokes a kind of primal, unshakable dread. It's not straightforward science fiction, but the world feels alien, an uncanny industrial purgatory, where the rules of reality seem to bend and break in slow, hypnotic rhythms. Lynch doesn't just tell a story, he really submerges us into this waking dream where the grotesque and the beautiful blur together into something deeply, deeply unsettling. I still remember the first time watching Eraserhead. I had heard the stories, discussions of its bizarre imagery, the disturbing sound design, and its reputation as one of the strangest films ever made. But I don't think anything could have prepared me for the sheer sensory assault that Lynch unleashes. The relentless hum of machinery, the suffocating silence between each echoing footstep, the distorted, almost alien expressions of its characters. It was like I stumbled into a film that existed outside of normal time and space. And it wasn't just weird for the sake of being weird, it was something deeper, something instinctual. And it wasn't just horror, it was existential horror, an exploration of fear that bypasses any logic and just digs straight into the raw nerves of the human condition. And then there was the baby, the grotesque, pitiful, unearthly thing that is somehow both a source of revulsion and this profound sadness. Lynch never explains what it is, and he doesn't need to. Like everything in Eraserhead, it operates on this level of pure feeling, symbolic, nightmarish, and painfully real. And when the film ended, I just sat there, silent, trying to process what I had witnessed. I wasn't sure if I loved it or was afraid of it. Maybe it was both, but I knew one thing. I had experienced something significant. It was the kind of film that wasn't going to fade away. It burrowed in. It was waiting to be revisited. It was waiting to show me something new each time. And over the years, with every rewatch, it's only grown in my estimation. It has revealed new layers, hidden emotions, and unsettling truths about life. Parenthood. Man, watching it the first time after I had kids, that's a whole nother thing. Isolation and the anxieties that lurk beneath the surface of everyday existence. But Eraserhead isn't just a masterpiece. It's a deeply personal film. It was shaped by Lynch's own fears, dreams, and the surreal logic of his imagination. And how did this haunting vision come to life? What compelled him to create such an unrelenting, nightmarish world. To understand Eraserhead, we need to go back to the beginning, back to David Lynch's early years, his struggles, his artistic obsessions, and the strange, dreamlike path that led him to craft maybe one of the most unique films in cinema history. Before we dive into the surreal nightmare that is Eraserhead, let's take a moment to appreciate just how unlikely this film's existence really is. David Lynch wasn't a seasoned filmmaker with a big budget. He was an artist, primarily a painter, a guy trying to channel something he couldn't quite explain into moving images. And the fact that he managed to complete Eraserhead at all, given the odds stacked against him, is almost as miraculous as the film itself. This was a labor of love, an obsession, and sheer stubborn persistence. And much of the behind-the-scenes story is just as strange and fascinating as the movie we ended up with. Eraserhead wasn't just Lynch's first feature film. It was his declaration to the world, a cinematic manifesto that screamed, "This is who I am." And who Lynch was, for his entire life, was a director obsessed with dream logic, industrial decay, and the unspeakable horrors lurking just beneath the surface of everyday life. He started developing Eraserhead while studying at the American Film Institute's Center for Advanced Film Studies, initially envisioning it as a short film. But like so many of his projects, it grew into something far stranger, something that simply refused to be contained in a brief runtime. What began as a simple idea stretched into a 5-year odyssey of financial struggles, creative battles, and unshakable vision that nearly drove him to the brink. Lynch has famously refused to explain Eraserhead in any clear or direct way. But what we do know, that its creation was heavily inspired by his years living in Philadelphia. He once described the city as a waking nightmare, full of industrial decay, relentless crime, and a creeping, inescapable dread. A feeling of fear diluted, he said, but never completely absent. That feeling seeps into every frame of Eraserhead. The factory-like landscapes, the inescapable mechanical hum, and the way everything seems slightly wrong. This wasn't just a setting, it was Lynch's attempt to capture a specific kind of existential horror. The kind you don't wake up from, because it's everywhere, all the time. He wasn't just imagining things either. Philadelphia in the late 60s and early 70s was a city in decline, plagued by crime, urban decay, and this atmosphere of eerie, post-industrial desolation. Lynch has recalled hearing the distant sound of gunshots and screams at night, the eerie glow of flickering streetlights, and the strange, almost otherworldly characters he'd encountered just walking down the street. All of that found its way into Eraserhead, shaping the film's bleak and oppressive mood and the unsettling, labyrinthine world that Henry Spencer inhabits. Then there's the grueling 5-year shoot. Now, making a movie under ideal conditions is hard enough. Making Eraserhead was nearly impossible. The production dragged on for 5 years, mostly because Lynch had next to no money. He took on odd jobs, survived on donations from friends, and even briefly lived on the Eraserhead set to keep costs down. At one point, he worked as a paperboy just to afford food. The cast and crew, though dedicated, had to endure the unpredictable schedule, often shooting whenever Lynch could scrape together enough funds for film stock. Jack Nance, who played Henry Spencer, had to keep that signature high-standing hairstyle for the entire shoot, meaning 5 years that bizarre hair was just a part of his daily existence. It became synonymous with him, so much so that he even often joked about how people assumed it was just his natural look, though in reality, it required careful maintenance to maintain the signature height and stiffness. And then there's the baby, the grotesque, whimpering mutant infant that I swear remains one of the most disturbing creations in cinema history. To this day, Lynch has, to his dying day, never revealed how it was made. Some rumors claimed it was an embalmed calf fetus. Others say it was meticulously crafted puppet or even an animatronic creation. Lynch, of course, never talked, and honestly, I think the mystery is better left unsolved. The baby is the perfect symbol for Eraserhead as a whole. Something unnatural, deeply unsettling, and impossible to look away from. And when it was all done, a midnight movie legend is born. Despite everything working against him, Lynch never wavered. He never compromised his vision, and in the end, Eraserhead wasn't just finished. It became one of the most legendary midnight movies of all time. Its release was slow and unconventional. At first, it played only in select theaters, often at midnight screenings, where it found an audience of insomniacs, film students, and counterculture cinephiles looking for something different, something they couldn't define but knew they needed to experience. Word of mouth spread, and before long, Eraserhead was cemented as a cult phenomenon, a film that wasn't just watched, but experienced. Rumor has it that Stanley Kubrick famously called it one of his favorite films, and its influence can be seen in everything from body horror to psychological surrealism. The film became a rite of passage for budding filmmakers and horror enthusiasts alike, a film that defied logic, categorization, and easy interpretation. The perseverance, the obsession, the sheer force of will that brought this film into existence is almost as fascinating as the film itself. Almost. So now, let's talk about the film, Eraserhead. So if you're someone who likes your movies with a clear linear plot and tidy explanations, this one might just drive you up the wall. But that's exactly what makes it so fascinating. Eraserhead isn't about traditional storytelling, it's about evoking emotions, tapping into fears you may not even realize you have, and immersing you in a world that feels just familiar enough to be deeply unsettling. Now, at its core, Eraserhead follows Henry Spencer, a lonely, anxious man living in a bleak industrial hellscape that seems to press down on him from all sides. His existence is one of isolation, punctuated by mechanical drones and looming shadows. A world where the walls feel like they're closing in. One day, he discovers that his girlfriend, Mary X, has given birth to their child, or at least something that barely resembles one. This grotesque, wailing creature, wrapped in bandages and emitting piercing cries, becomes the center of Henry's world, trapping him in suffocating nightmare where reality, dreams, and hallucinations all blur together. As Henry attempts to navigate his new reality, he encounters eerie figures, disturbing visions, and a constant, unshakable sense of impending doom. But Eraserhead isn't just about fatherhood. It's about the sheer weight of responsibility and the terror of an unknown future. Lynch's film taps into universal anxieties. The fear of being trapped in a life you never wanted, the crushing pressure to conform, and the alienation of feeling like a stranger in your own world. It's about the horror of intimacy, the grotesque nature of human biology, and the way the mundane becomes monstrous when viewed through a distorted, surreal lens. Now, one of the most enigmatic and unforgettable elements in the film is the lady in the radiator. This strange, otherworldly woman with her exaggerated smile and unsettlingly pale complexion. She appears to Henry in visions, performing a hauntingly childlike song, "In heaven, everything is fine." But what does she represent? Some interpret her as a symbol of escape, an angelic presence offering Henry relief from his suffering, a beacon of hope in an otherwise oppressive world. Others see her as something far more sinister, a deceptive force luring him into oblivion, promising peace while leading him towards self-destruction. Like much of Eraserhead, her meaning is ambiguous, shifting depending on the viewer's own fears and desires. Her presence reinforces one of the film's central themes, the longing for escape from an unbearable reality. And then perhaps more than any other film, Eraserhead is defined by its atmosphere. Lynch masterfully constructs a world that feels decayed. It felt isolated and strangely hypnotic. The film's oppressive sound design, filled with all the industrial hums, mechanical groans, and eerie silences that stretch on just a little too long, create a constant, suffocating tension. The soundscape isn't just background noise. It is an active force, pressing down on both Henry and the audience, making the film feel inescapably immersive. Every frame is carefully composed, every texture exaggerated to enhance the overwhelming sense of decay and claustrophobia. Shadows loom unnaturally. Spaces feel both vast and crushingly small. And the entire film feels like it exists in some kind of suspended reality. Timeless, yet decayed, like a half-remembered nightmare. And it's a film that lives in your subconscious. What makes Eraserhead so powerful is how it manages to feel both deeply personal and universally unsettling. Lynch has described the film as being heavily influenced by his own anxieties about fatherhood, and you can feel that raw, unfiltered dread throughout the entire movie. But it doesn't tell you what to think. It simply places you inside its world and lets you feel it. And I think that's why Eraserhead endures. It's not a film you simply watch. It's a film you have to experience, whether you interpret it as an exploration of parental terror, a commentary on societal repression, or a descent into pure madness. One thing is certain, it sticks with you. Long after the credits roll, the images, sounds, and feelings linger, burrowing into your subconscious like a strange, unsettling dream that you just can't quite shake. Now let's take a moment to really appreciate the sheer craftsmanship that went into Eraserhead. This is a film where every frame, every sound, and every moment feels meticulously constructed to unsettle and hypnotize. Lynch's mastery of mood and atmosphere is on full display here, and the way he combines performance, sound, and cinematography, well, it makes Eraserhead one of the most immersive nightmares ever put to film. So let's break it down, piece by piece, and see why this film feels like stepping into some waking dream or nightmare. First, the performance. Jack Nance delivers an absolutely mesmerizing performance as Henry Spencer. His wide-eyed, dazed expressions carry an almost unbearable weight, embodying fear, confusion, and quiet desperation. There's something deeply human about Henry. He's not some over-the-top horror protagonist. He's just a man trying to navigate this incomprehensible world. His silence speaks volumes. His hesitant movements betray a man constantly on edge, and his nervous, almost childlike demeanor makes him both endearing and tragic. What's remarkable is how little dialogue Nance actually has to work with. Lynch keeps the conversation sparse and awkward, which means that every facial expression and movement carries immense significance. The way Henry stiffens when his girlfriend's family bombards him with these bizarre questions, the way his eyes dart around the industrial hellscape that he's trapped in, it's these little details sell the performance more than any line of dialogue ever could. The supporting cast, though small, adds to the film's surreal quality. Charlotte Stewart as Mary X conveys jittery anxiety. Her fidgety movements and distant glances make her just as uneasy in the world as Henry. Jeannie Bates and Alan Joseph, playing Mary's parents, are brilliantly bizarre. Her father's unsettling enthusiasm and her mother's creeping intensity make for some of the most uncomfortable dinner scenes I think I've ever seen in cinema. And then there's Laurel Near as the enigmatic lady in the radiator. Her eerie, angelic presence and haunting song, they provide an ambiguous sense of hope, or, if you view it this way, just another layer of existential dread. And then there's the sound. If you've seen Eraserhead, you know that it's not just something you watch. You have to hear it, turn it up loud, something you have to feel in your bones. Lynch himself worked heavily on the film's unsettling industrial soundscape, and the result, it is one of the most oppressive, hypnotic auditory experiences in cinema. That ever-present hum of machinery, the distant whirs and clanks, the eerie droning that never quite fades away, it all burrows into your subconscious. The sound isn't just background noise. It is an active force, shaping the horror as much as or even more than the visuals. The mechanical screeches and hisses, they're like whispers of the decaying world, and they never let up, creating a constant sense of unease. And then, of course, the wailing of the mutant baby. It's not just a cry, it's something unnatural, something shrill and insistent that cuts through every moment. The baby's cries, which seem to range from whining gasps to guttural, almost inhuman shrieks, act as a relentless reminder of Henry's suffocating new reality. It is one of the most unnerving sound elements in horror history. It makes the film's silences even more deafening when they finally arrive. Lynch's use of diegetic and non-diegetic sound also blurs the line between reality and nightmare. There are moments where the audio seems to slip into this otherworldly hum, as though we've crossed into another dimension without ever realizing it. The film's sound design is so essential to its power that watching Eraserhead on mute would feel like stripping away half of its soul. Visually, Eraserhead is just as haunting. The stark black and white cinematography handled by Frederick Elms and Herbert Cardwell heightens the nightmarish quality. Lynch's use of lighting and shadow plays a huge role in creating unease. Notice how Henry's tiny apartment always seems to be lurking in darkness, how figures emerge from shadows like ghosts, how even the brightest scenes have a sense of decay and cold detachment. The industrial landscapes are equally striking. Towering smokestacks, crumbling buildings, and empty streets create an overwhelming sense of isolation. It's a world devoid of warmth or comfort, and the cinematography reinforces that feeling at every turn. Even when Henry steps outside, the sky is a void. The horizon is featureless. The air feels thick with something unnatural. The cityscape feels infinite, but claustrophobic, a paradox that makes Henry's existence even more suffocating. Lynch also employs a lot of extreme close-ups, forcing us to linger on strange, unsettling details. The texture of Henry's hair, the grotesque movements of the baby, the waxy expressions of the dinner guests. These shots all make us feel trapped, like we're peering too closely at something we should not be seeing. And the contrast between these extreme close-ups and the vast, empty compositions of Henry's apartment and the industrial wasteland further disorients us and reinforces the film's themes of isolation and, of course, that existential dread. One of the most striking visual techniques Lynch uses is his play with depth and space. There are times when characters seem to emerge from the darkness as if materializing from the void, and other times when backgrounds seem to stretch endlessly into nothingness. This manipulation of spatial awareness gives the film a dreamlike, almost purgatorial quality, as if Henry is neither here nor there, but suspended in some in-between state, forever teetering on the edge of reality. When you put it all together, the performances, the sound, the cinematography, it becomes clear why Eraserhead is such a singular, unforgettable experience. Lynch wasn't just telling a story, he was creating a world that you get lost in, whether you want to or not. It's a film that gets under your skin, lingers in your mind. Jack Nance's performance captures a man paralyzed by fear and uncertainty. The sound design wraps around you like an unshakable fever dream, suffocating and immersive. The cinematography constructs a decayed industrial nightmare that feels at once limitless and crushingly confined. Together, they create something more than just a horror film. An experience, a descent into the uncanny, and a masterclass in atmosphere and mood. If this is what Lynch was capable of in his first feature film, it's absolutely no wonder he went on to redefine cinema as we know it. So what happens when a film refuses to be neatly placed into a single genre? When it unnerves audiences just as much as it mesmerizes them? Well, that's the legacy of Eraserhead, a movie that from its very first screening became something more than just a film, an experience, a cinematic nightmare that lingers in your subconscious. And despite its humble, shoestring budget origins, it grew into an absolute cultural phenomenon, shaping not only independent cinema, but the very language of surrealist storytelling in film. Upon its release, Eraserhead was met with confusion, revulsion, and admiration. It quickly found a home in the world of midnight cinema, where adventurous audiences embraced its sheer weirdness and hypnotic horror. These weren't your average moviegoers. They were insomniacs, artists, seekers of the strange, drawn to the haunting atmosphere and the eerie industrial world that Lynch had conjured. Screenings of Eraserhead became more than just a movie night. They were an initiation into a new kind of cinematic consciousness. It was a film whispered about in hushed tones among those who craved something outside the mainstream, something that defied explanation and demanded attention. But what began as a cult fascination quickly seeped into the larger cinematic landscape. Over the years, Eraserhead transformed from underground curiosity to artistic blueprint, an artifact of pure, unfiltered creative vision. It wasn't just a film, it was a statement. Filmmakers and artists took note. As I said, Stanley Kubrick, a director known for his meticulous attention to tone and atmosphere, reportedly screened Eraserhead for the cast and crew of The Shining to help them grasp the unsettling mood he wanted to evoke. That connection is impossible to ignore. Both films take the mundane and twist it into something deeply unsettling. Both use sound design to manipulate the audience on a primal level, and both are deeply concerned with isolation and the slow unraveling of the mind. More recently, filmmakers like Yorgos Lanthimos, David Eggers, and Ari Aster have all cited Eraserhead as an influence, particularly in their approach to psychological horror and existential dread. Its fingerprints are all over modern genre films that emphasize atmosphere over exposition, where horror creeps in through sound, space, and the uncanny, rather than traditional jump scares. The suffocating dread of The Witch, the eerie surrealism of The Killing of a Sacred Deer, and the nightmarish family dynamics of Hereditary all owe something to Lynch's debut. Eraserhead taught filmmakers that horror doesn't have to be about the monster under the bed. It can be about the creeping unease of simply existing in an indifferent universe. But why does Eraserhead continue to resonate? Part of its longevity comes from its refusal to be pinned down. Is it horror, science fiction, a dark comedy, a meditation on the anxiety of parenthood? Well, the answer is it's all of the above. Lynch taps into something deeper than conventional storytelling, taps into subconscious fears, the unease that lurk beneath our day-to-day existence. That's why Eraserhead doesn't age. It doesn't rely on specific cultural references or trends. Instead, it speaks to something timeless. The fear of the unknown, the fear of responsibility, the fear of losing control over your own life. And let's not forget the visual and sonic innovation. The film's grotesque yet hypnotic imagery, whether it's Henry's iconic electrified hair or the hauntingly strange lady in the radiator, they stick with you. They refuse to be forgotten. Lynch's use of industrial noise and eerie silence as a form of storytelling was revolutionary, setting the stage for his later work and inspiring generations of sound designers who realized that sometimes the most unsettling thing isn't what you see, it's what you hear. Without Eraserhead, would we have the oppressive soundscapes of There Will Be Blood, the abstract horrors of Under the Skin? If this film didn't get made, would we have the dissonant unease of Twin Peaks? Probably not. Beyond cinema, Eraserhead has permeated other corners of pop culture. The film's surrealist nightmare logic has influenced everything from music videos to video games, with artists across discipline drawing inspiration from its disturbing, dreamlike aesthetic. The industrial nightmare world Lynch created finds echoes in everything from 9-Inch Nails to the stark, alienating environments of survival horror games like Silent Hill. Henry Spencer himself, with his wide-eyed, haunted eyes and perpetually disheveled hair, has become an icon of cinematic anxiety, a visual shorthand for unease and existential dread. Now, for the real talk. What do I think? It's pretty obvious, but there's something about Eraserhead that lingers long after the screen fades to black. Doesn't just tell a story, it infects your mind. It nestles into the deepest, dustiest corners of your subconscious. Watching it is like wandering through a dreamscape where everything feels familiar, but somehow irreparably wrong. It's the embodiment of cinematic unease, a film that doesn't just ask you to observe, but compels you to feel every ounce of its discomfort, its dread, its suffocating silence. That's why, for me, Eraserhead is the ultimate cinematic nightmare, pure, unfiltered, and inescapable. It's an easy 10 out of 10 because, quite frankly, there is nothing else like it. One of the scenes that always gets under my skin is the grotesque dinner sequence with Mary's family. There's an absurd, almost slapstick kind of humor to it, but not the kind that makes you laugh. It's the kind that makes you squirm. The tiny, convulsing chickens leaking some unidentifiable fluid as Mary's father prattles on with his exaggerated, vacant grin. It's domestic horror at its strangest, turning something as routine as a meal into an unsettling fever dream. And then there's that lady in the radiator. She fascinates me. Her otherworldly, cherubic face bathed in harsh stage lighting. Her haunting, almost lullaby-like performance of In Heaven, Everything is Fine is mesmerizing. Is she a beacon of salvation? A coping mechanism for Henry's tortured psyche? Or just another illusion in a world built on fractured realities? Whatever the case, she offers the closest thing to warmth in a film otherwise steeped in the cold industrial decay. Of course, can't talk about Eraserhead without mentioning its surreal, horrifying climax. I won't spoil it for those who haven't seen it, but suffice it to say, it is one of the most visceral, nightmarish finales in cinema. It transcends narrative logic and plunges straight into raw emotion, a feverish explosion of body horror, existential terror, and the overwhelming weight of despair. Every time I see it, I feel like I'm watching something sacred, forbidden, something I shouldn't be witnessing, but I can't look away. And that's the magic of Eraserhead. Every viewing peels back a new layer. Is it about the anxieties of fatherhood, the soul-crushing monotony of industrial life, the terror of isolation and repression? Maybe all of the above. Or maybe it's just a dream, a shared universal nightmare that we've all had but can never fully remember. But what about you? Have you seen Eraserhead? What's your interpretation? What do you make of the monstrous wailing child? Drop me a message. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So that's going to wrap up this episode of Real Talk. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into Lynchian madness. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review. It helps more film lovers find the show. You can also follow me on social media and keep this conversation going. We're on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, at Real Talk, or just shoot me an email, therealrealtalk@gmail.com, with your thoughts, your theories, or just some of your favorite weird movies. Next time, we're stepping out of the bleak industrial nightmare of Eraserhead and into the deeply, emotionally, devastatingly human world of The Elephant Man. It's a film that took David Lynch from cult underground to Oscar-nominated auteur, and it's every bit as haunting in its own way. You won't want to miss it. Until then, stay curious, stay strange, and remember, if your dinner starts twitching, maybe don't eat it.
Underneath the silver screen, gleam, gleam, talking reels and all their schemes. Dusty scenes and dreams unfold, stories told in shadows bold. Gritty plots and whispers tight, dim the streets and moonlight bright. We dissect the cinematic art, real by real we pull apart. The real talk where voices play with velvet words and starlit sway, reviewing tales both light and dark, classic films that leave a mark. Dive deep into celluloid night, critique the legends in our sight. Every frame a layer appeal, truth and intrigue are revealed. Fan the flames of black and white, the mystery dances in the night. Casablanca to the crime, in every score we find a rhyme. The real talk where voices play with velvet words and moonlight bright. With velvet world we pull apart, real by real we pull apart. The real talk where voices play with velvet words and starlit sway. With velvet worlds and starlit sway, real by real we pull apart. The real talk where voices play with velvet words and starlit sway, reviewing tales both light and dark, classic films that leave a mark.